Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Southern Gal True Crime. If this is your first time here, thank you so much for deciding to drop in and hang out with me for a little bit. I have a special video that I found, a topic that I found interesting. A couple of weeks ago, I did a video of the top 8 states with the most serial offenders. And after I did the video and uploaded it, or actually, I think it was a live stream, I had a comment from one of my subscribers asking me if I knew how many serial offenders were operating in the US today, as in the last 5 to 10 years, let's say the last decade. And that was a very interesting question. So I researched and found a bunch of statistics about serial offenders. But I found this one article that I thought was very interesting, made a lot of good points. So today's question, before I go any further, is: are serial offenders on the decline? And like I said, after I got this question from one of my subscribers, I did my research and I found a very interesting article that made some very good, in my opinion, some very good points. And I tend to agree, in my opinion, with some of them. So I thought I would just I took the article and I just took some of the quotes from some of the professionals and statistics that they quoted in this article to share with you today. And this article comes from The Hill. This is the first time I'd ever used this website. I will link it description to the whole article in the description box, so you can read the whole article for yourself and make your own decisions about what you think about these statistics. And I would love to hear what you guys think. So please do leave me a comment after you watch this video. Everybody's opinion is welcome here. Just always be respectful. That's all I ask. So according to this article, it says America remains fascinated with serial offenders, yet in recent years, serial homicides have plummeted. One study found that the number of active serial offenders dwindled from 198 in 1987, which is the largest number on record, to just 12 in 2018. And I found that very interesting. Of course, lately we have had some alleged suspected serial offenders that have been discovered, arrested, charged. Of course, you see here we have Rex Heuermann, who is one of the alleged Long Island serial offenders, because in my opinion, there are or were more than one serial offender operating in the Long Island area back when they started finding these bodies. We had Bitroff, James Bitroff, I think that's his first name. He was operating, they think, around the same time that Heuermann was. I believe Bitroff has been charged with 2 so far. And then, so we have Rex Heuermann, of course. He has been charged with, as of right now, the Gilgo 4 that they found on Gilgo Beach. And this article says that Heuermann may go down as one of the last in a vanishing species of American criminal. Once again, they said hundreds of serial offenders roamed the nation in the 1980s and 1990s. They captivated the public imagination, and they inspired such popular pop cultural brands as the film Silence of the Lambs and the television series like Dexter. And I remember back, in the 80s and 90s, you had all these movies about serial offenders came out. You had Silence of the Lambs, you had Sevens, you had the Seven, you had the Bone Collector. All these movies were being made in the 80s and 90s. And then once again, the TV series like Dexter and others. So yeah, it was 80s and 90s. It seems were very, very active time for serial offenders. Of course, back in the 70s, you had the Ted Bundys and the John Wayne Gacy's and Dahmers into the 70s and 80s. So back then was what they call the heyday of serial offenders. According to this study that was done by Radford and Gulf Coast universities, according to this, now this is just according to this one study, they say the number of victims dropped from 404 in 1987 to an estimated 36 in 2019. So that is a sharp decline. But they did caution that these numbers may be low because of the lag time in identifying serial offenders. And that I agree with that point. You had in the last decade, you've had James Joseph DAngelo, who was discovered for his crimes that he committed back in the 70s and 80s. So, and that's been what, 20, 30 years ago. So it takes a good number of years to identify alleged serial offenders. So I agree on that point with the point that they made here. But please let me know, like I said, once again in the comments, let me know your opinions or thoughts on any of this information. It goes on to say that James Allen Fox, who is a professor of criminology, law, and public policy at Northeastern University, says would-be serial offenders, they might commit crimes, but they get caught more nowadays in the 2000s before they achieve the status of serial offender. He goes on to say it's rather difficult to take the lives of a series of strangers and not be detected. And I put the picture here of Brian Koberger up. Of course, he was the suspected offender in the Idaho 4 case. Once again, innocent until and unless proven guilty. Who knows if this was if he was just getting started. In my opinion, now this is just my opinion, I think when they go back, if he is the offender, if they go back and start looking at his history of when he was younger, they're going to find some stuff. It may not necessarily be serial homicides, but just all those, I hate to use the cliches of all the things they use to try to identify serial offenders, but the harming of the animals, antisocial behavior, psychopathy, all that's, you guys watching know what I'm talking about. The Idaho homicides may have been his first actual homicides, but like I said, in my opinion, I think he started with some kind of crimes, and it could be. They also have a site, peeping toms, residential burglaries, things like that build up to work. They work their way up basically to homicides. Mr. Fox also says that they, meaning serial offenders, still exist. People who have those thoughts and passions, but either they attempt to soothe them, meaning they go out and commit the crimes and they get caught, or they find other outlets. And some of those other outlets, we may touch on them a little bit later on in the video, but we really can't go into detail because if I did, I would get kicked off YouTube. So I agree. Once again, I agree with them, with Mr. Fox on this point. In decades past, serial offenders dominated the headlines. Of course, pictured here, we have Ted Bundy, who had at least 30 victims in the 1970s. John Wayne Gacy had at least 33 victims in Chicago. Jeffrey Dahmer had at least 17 victims between 1978 and 1991. Gary Ridgway, the Green River offender, he had at least 49 victims in Washington and Oregon in the 1980s and 1990s. So once again, I'm sure if you're watching this, you follow true crime and you've heard of all these cases. But since then, you really, after that, like I said, the heyday in the 80s and 90s, you didn't really hear a lot about serial offenders being caught or discovered or suspected. So, like I said, I'm just going over the high points of some interesting, what I found interesting in this article. So I mentioned earlier about Joseph James DAngelo. According to the article, they say the most notorious serial offender captured in the past decade is probably Joseph James DAngelo, who is, of course, the alleged Golden State offender. He was arrested in 2018, and he has been linked to at least 13 homicides and 50 assaults in California. But once again, like I said earlier, most of his crimes took place back in the 70s and 80s. And it was advances, once again, using DNA technology and genetic genealogy, which enabled police to identify him using genetic samples from relatives. Once they started linking his DNA to all these cases, they were able to clear out these cases and solve all these cases from past decades. Once again, we go back to Rex Shearman. He has just recently, in the last year, been arrested and charged. This says with the homicides of 3 women, when I know it's 4, whose bodies were found swaddled in a camouflage burlap on a stretch of beach, which is Gilgo Beach. These women went missing in 2009 and 2010. Of course, Human has pled not guilty. Once again, advances in technology allowed investigators to track Human, who prosecutors said had concealed or tried to conceal his movements by using disposable cell phones and surfing the web incognito. Investigators said Human betrayed himself with anonymous internet queries such as, quote, "Why could law enforcement not trace the calls made by the Long Island serial offender?" And he has a whole list of internet searches that I most definitely can't go into because they are horrible. But you can, if you want to, if you haven't seen them or heard them already, you can Google and Google search, and they will come up. So we have Huerman that has been caught within the last year. They also mentioned Anthony Robinson from Washington D.C. He has been was charged in the 2021 homicides of 2 women whose bodies were recovered in Harrisonburg, Pennsylvania, or Virginia, excuse me, Harrisonburg, Virginia, and he is suspected in 3 other cases. Apparently, police have dubbed him the shopping cart offender, alleging that he moved bodies in shopping carts before dumping them in vacant lots. So now, once again, this is recently 2021. He has been caught and charged. I'll have to look into him and see if he's been convicted or what's going on with his cases. So we have another one in this decade or in the last couple of years. We have Thomas, they mentioned Thomas Hargrove, who he is the founder of a nonprofit organization called, and I have to be careful how I phrase this because I can't say the M word. I believe it's called the Red Room Accountability Project, and I will put a link to it in the description box. So Mr. Hargrove notes the case of Darren Dion Van. He was convicted of taking the lives of 7 women in 2013 and 2014. They say that though Van lacks the infamy of Bundy's or Gacy's, Hargrove believes, and this is just Mr. Hargrove's opinion, he may ultimately rank among the nation's most prolific serial offenders. Because I guess he thinks this because after Mr. Van's arrest, Van claimed to have taken the lives of, quote, way more victims in Illinois than in Indiana. So that led Chicago media to speculate whether Van may have had anything to do with the city's many unsolved strangulation homicides. So it'll be very interesting to see if anything comes of that. Once again, Mr. Hargrove went so far as to say, quote, he could actually be in the running for the most homicides of all time. Now, we all know, or anybody who watches or studies true crime on a regular basis, that once some of these serial offenders are caught and charged, they like to sometimes inflate their number of victims just to, for whatever reason, to try to push themselves up higher in the list of serial offenders. So we'll take this with a grain of salt, that what he said about his claim that he has more victims. But it could be he's telling the truth. We have Samuel Little. He was charged or was connected to, I believe, 90, somewhere in the 90 range of victims, and they have confirmed now 60 of his victims are confirmed, and that's a big number. So it could turn out that Darren Dion Van does have a high victim count, unfortunately, but we will have to wait and see. So, what is the definition of a serial offender? There are varying, when I was doing research, there were varying opinions and definitions that I found of what qualifies somebody as a serial offender. But according to this article, it says that criminologists generally define serial homicide as the unlawful killing of two or more victims by the same offender in separate incidents. And then, like I said, they say other researchers and professionals set the bar at three or four distinct homicides. In other words, separate offenses at different times, because serial offenders generally, they will commit some crimes and have what they call the cooling off period and then commit more. So that's what they mean, I'm assuming, by distinct incidents or homicides. So they compare it to a spree offender, by contrast, is multiple homicides by a single offender in a single event. So that raises, I asked myself the question when I read that, technically, going back to Brian Kohlberger, if we go by this definition, a spree offender is, or a spree offense is multiple homicides, single offender in a single event. That is what happened in Idaho. We had 4 victims, but they were all in a single event. So would that put Kohlberger in the spree offender category? Let me know, please, what you think in the comments. Technically, it would if we go by this definition. But once again, we'll have to, once again, allegedly, if Kohlberger is the offender in the Idaho case, and he is convicted, and his DNA is put into CODIS and all the other databases, and if they go back and look at his history of other cases from when he was younger, and they happen to be able to link him to other cases, then that would, by this definition, qualify him as a serial offender. So I just thought that was interesting. So James Allen Fox, who is the professor of criminology, says that the predominant serial offender is a sadist who kills for the fun of it. Spree offenders, on the other hand, do not do it for, quote, fun. They have other reasons. They say revenge, possibly against society, against employers, family members, things of that nature. Many spree offenders expect death or arrest, whereas serial killers, by definition, have to evade capture to succeed, so they can raise their victim count to achieve the stat to whatever 2, 3, 4, how many victims that you want to. I've always gone by the definition of at least 3. That's just my opinion. If you have at least 3 victims by the same offender in separate incidents, that's what I've always based my opinion on of whether or not somebody is a serial offender. But they say that it is becoming progressively harder to do, as in to evade capture, to succeed in building up their victim count. And so why the decline, or the assumed perceived decline in serial offenders? Once again, Mr. Fox says, for one, people are more cautious. And I agree, that is true. I know I'm more cautious these days than I was, because I grew up a child and young adult teenager in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. And back then, it was just a different time. It says here, Mr. Fox says, people don't hitchhike anymore. People don't let their kids play in front yards. They have cell phones. Back in the 70s, 80s, and even the early 90s, you definitely didn't have cell phones with cameras, because they're going to mention cameras. I grew up and live in a very small town, under 2,000. And when I was a teenager, we were allowed to, walk around the town after dark. We would gather at the city park to play and hang out, as teenagers, without any worry of anybody coming and snatching anybody. Like I said, it's just a different time. And in the 2000s and 2023, it's just, you can't do that anymore. You can't live your life in fear and lock yourself away in your house and not go anywhere, but you do, in my opinion, have to be very, very cautious these days. When you're out and about, be very aware of your surroundings, and just always keep your eye out. Mr. Fox also mentions we have cell phones now. So if you find yourself in a dangerous situation or a suspicious situation, or if you get stranded in your car, all you have to do is pick up your cell phone and either call 911 if you're in a dangerous situation, or if you're stranded in your car, you would pick up the phone and call a family member or somebody to come help you out, as opposed to having to get out and walk or hitchhike. He also makes the point that most pedestrians, or most people now, of course, all smartphones now have cameras, and where you can take pictures and video anything suspicious you see, or any dangerous situation. And also, there are cameras everywhere, and that's true. And it's a good thing, in my opinion, when it comes to catching offenders, or trying to find out what happens if someone is a victim of a violent crime, or if they go missing. Most businesses have cameras. A lot of homes either have cameras, or like the Ring doorbells. You have of course, the cameras at all the intersections. So Mr. Fox says it's very hard for an offender to do something in public without being recorded. And that is another point that I agree with. So back to Mr. Hargrove, who is the founder of the this accountability project. He says that organized offenders like uh, serial offenders like to read about other serial offenders, and we know then. And going back to Rex Heuermann, apparently he has become pen pal since he's been incarcerated. He has become pen pals with the happy face offender Keith Jesperson. So they keep in contact and they study up on each other. Thomas Hargrove said, and they are paying attention. They are aware that science has gotten way better, which is true with the advances, like I said, in the cell phone tracking technology, all the cameras, advances in DNA technology. It's just come such a long way. And he says they recognize that they're taking ever increasing risk by doing what they do. So, in conclusion, Mr. Hargrove says the good news is that serial homicide is on the decline, but the bad news is, and this is just Mr. Hargrove's opinion, the bad news is there are still plenty of serial offenders out there. So, are we? Which side of the coin should we take? The good news or the bad news, or just take them equally together? I believe, like I said, in my opinion, I believe, like it's like this article said, there are still serial offenders out there, unfortunately, who have not been discovered yet. Because just going by statistics, there are always, at any given time, there are always serial offenders out there operating, but they just have not been discovered yet, or they have not been caught. Now, once again, this is my opinion. Feel free to leave yours in the comments. And it's just becoming, like I said, harder and harder for these serial offenders to what they call earlier in the article, it said that in the 70s and 80s, these serial offenders basically flew under the radar. But it does give me hope, though, that with the arrest of Rex Heuermann, James Joseph DAngelo, Brian Kohlberger, who I think could have gone on to be, and unless they go back and find out that he does have other victims, alleged victims. If the Idaho case was Brian Kohlberger's first alleged offense, I think, in my opinion, if he hadn't been caught, he most definitely would have gone on to become a serial offender. Like I said, if he's not already a serial offender, if they go back and do find him linked to other victims. But like I said, once again, let me know what you guys think about this information. I just wanted to share it with you and let you make your own decisions about what you think about this information and what your opinions are about this. So if you found this video interesting, informing, please do consider, if you're not already, please do consider subscribing. Hit the notification bell to all so you won't miss when I upload new videos or go live. Please do like, share, comment. For a small channel like mine, that helps push this information out to more people. And the most important information from my channel that I want pushed out to more people are the missing persons and the cold cases. That is the heart and soul of my channel, is sharing missing persons and cold cases that do not get the national public attention. I just want to do the best I can to bring more awareness to these cases. So like, shares, comments, any friends, family you may know that is interested in true crime or missing persons and cold cases, any true crime groups you may be in. Any shares you could give me would be much appreciated. Please hit that like button for this video before you leave. So until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe out there, Take care of each other. That is the most important thing we can do in this life, is take care of our fellow human being. So I will see you next time. Thanks again for watching. Bye-bye.